I will call the July 20th, 2020 meeting of the Monona City Council to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Alder Schilling.
Here.
Council President Wood.
Here.
Alder Coor.
Here.
Alder Thomas.
Here.
Alder Groupie.
Here.
Alder Moore.
Here.
Mayor O'Connor is excused.
All right. Those who would like to join in the Pledge of Allegiance, please stand and join me. Or not stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. So we have two sets of minutes, June 25th and July 6th. I entertain a motion for either one of those or both.
I'll move approval. Both.
For both.
Second.
Okay. Any changes to either of those? Seeing none, all in favor of approval, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries and minutes are approved. We have Sarah Smith, Kane County Supervisor for District 24 as a guest tonight. Sarah, you want to go ahead?
Sure. So I was asked to join just to give an update on the 14-point criminal justice platform that you may have heard about that the Dane County Board is working on. It's an initiative to try to reduce the jail population in Dane County and in general improve equity and experience people have with the criminal justice system, and also prevent people's entrance into the criminal justice system when it's not warranted. So one of the first things I wanted to note is that a lot of those initiatives will require partnerships with municipalities. Obviously, municipalities like Monona that have their own city police department do a lot of the, they bring people into the jail. So while we have authority over the jail, the sheriff has authority over the jail, the people that come there and a lot of the prevention efforts to try to reduce the jail population on the front end will rely upon municipal efforts as well. So one of the first efforts for that diversion component of the plan is expanding the use of the Community Restorative Court Program. And I know that Monona has been having conversations around the city's use of that court system. And I think obviously it's shown really great results in the places that it's been utilized. And we're looking at ways to expand the access to that court program and provide more alternatives to incarceration, in particular for younger defendants. Another one that I'm particularly interested in and that I've talked about in the past, and I know I've talked to, I think, some of the members of the council on this, is mental health first responders. So the City of Madison, which you might have already heard about, the City of Madison and the county have sort of partnered on an effort to analyze the opportunity for Dane County and the City of Madison to create a mental health first responder program. So the situation in which somebody calls 911, they're having a mental health crisis, but they're not a direct threat to others. You don't necessarily need a law enforcement officer to respond, but maybe somebody who's trained in that, de-escalation process for someone in a mental health crisis, and instead can help them access treatment instead of potentially putting them at risk of ending up in handcuffs by the end of the encounter. So that's something that I'm particularly interested in. That's certainly moving forward as one of the ways that we're going to divert people from the criminal justice system in Dane County. Another one has been just looking at other ways to limit arrests, including, they're looking at something called the sequential intercept model, and there are just quite a few of these programs that they are looking into at this point that the county board is actively pursuing to try to divert people out of the criminal justice system in the first place. There are also a variety of initiatives that are not necessarily within the purview of the county board, but would require agreements between the courts, district attorneys, the sheriff's department, and the public defender's office, but are things that the county board could pursue and put forth at least as resolutions that we are in support of to try to encourage movement from those people who have the legal authority to do some of these things, which are more around charging and sentencing. So the county board doesn't have authority over that. And a lot of course, different sentence levels come from state level laws. And so there's also not a lot that we can do about, the felony charges and things like that. But at least in terms of the things that are in the purview of the district attorney and the clerk of courts and the sheriff, we're working on creating some committees to evaluate the opportunities that could be there to reduce sentencing and change opportunities for charging so that people are not immediately put into a jail sentence, but might have some other opportunities for community service or other ways to keep them out of the jail population, if they even are charged with a crime. The other one would be urging the Wisconsin Department of Corrections to hold revocation hearings outside of the jail. That's in particular during the COVID crisis, but we know that COVID is going to continue to be a problem for, probably another year. And so ensuring that the safety of people who are participating in those hearings, that would be something, again, where the county board doesn't have the legal authority, but we would at least be able to, make some sort of statement and try to urge action from the authorities that do have that, to ask them not to add bodies to the jail and instead hold hearings virtually or just reduce the number of people that need to be in the jail for those kinds of proceedings. There are also going to be some things around transparency, and I'm actually a co-sponsor on one piece of legislation that's moving forward to provide more data available on the website for people to see the population of those that are currently in the Dane County Jail and why they are there, whether they're there for an inability to meet a bond that they need, if they're awaiting approval on a signature bond, and what level of crime might have gotten them there. So we get a sense of who are the people that are being kind of held up at the jail, and is there some way that we can move the process along more quickly or adjust what we're doing in that type of proceeding to make sure that those people are not in the jail longer than they need to be. And there would also be some additional resolutions to potentially hire more information management people to provide that kind of transparency to the general public. So that's generally the overview of the 14-point plan. There's obviously more to it than that. I don't think I even hit 14 of the points, but I'm happy to have conversations with any of you offline if there's something in particular that you'd like to dig more into, or have other ideas on top of some of these plans that we are already working on.
All right, thank you. Anyone, Nancy, you have a question?
Yeah, I just was wondering if that 14-point plan was posted, Sarah, or if you could send it to us so that we can look at it in more detail. Has it been posted somewhere?
Sure, I can look and see what documentation we have. I know there was a press release put out originally when it was put out that lists more in an overview of all of the 14 points in addition.
Okay, great. I can look for that on the county's website if
Sure.
I'm assuming it's on there. Okay, great, thank you.
Alder Groupie?
Sarah, thanks so much for sharing all of this with us. And just moving forward, how can we connect with you and how should we communicate with you in order to be collaborative in achieving some of these aims as a municipality?
Yeah, well, I would be happy to have, if any of you want to set up, a Zoom conversation with one or two of you, or if there's anything in particular that you're working on with the, Monona Police Department that you think would relate to the jail population, I'd be happy to set up or join any of those meetings or conversations and connect with you on what the county's doing or what maybe we should do if you have an idea or something that comes out of your police department that you think would be beneficial for the county to consider. So you can give me a call or send me an email. It's just smith.sarah@countyofdane. So, and I'd be happy to talk more about any of these.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. Okay. I see Devin Renner was here a second ago.
Yes, still
Oh,
is.
there he is. Still here.
Yeah, Devin is still here. Also my child who screams occasionally is here. But no, I have nothing to add. Just spectating tonight.
All right. Have fun. And
Always.
yeah. And the Novaks, you're here for an item later on the agenda. Brian, should we take their comments now or wait till it comes up? You're muted.
I would wait till we get to that agenda item.
Okay. All right, so we'll wait for you for the Novaks. When your item comes up, you can speak to it.
And now it causes feedback. And
There is no public hearing. There is no consent agenda. Council action items, unfinished business. 1A, consideration of ordinance 7-50-733, amending section 94-15 of the Code of Ordinances to increase threshold requiring roll call votes from the city administrator. Is there a motion?
Move approval.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
That was Christie.
Yes.
Okay, Brian, did you want to talk about those?
yes, so as you recall from our last meeting, this is more about
housekeeping item.
to change the roll call vote system so that we just mirror it with state statute language going up to $25,000, which is what is currently in the state statute. So if we ever have any item, contract or otherwise, that requires $25,000 or more, it will automatically require a roll call vote. However, a council member could ask for a roll call vote on any resolution or ordinance at any time, so this would not prohibit that. This just helps us mirror kind of larger ticket items, if you will, that would necessitate a roll call vote.
All right, any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. The next item, 2B is consideration, 2A, consideration of resolution 20-7-2421, approval to submit the 2019 compliance maintenance annual report, CMAR, review and recommendations from the Public Works Director. And this is this annual thing that we do, a stormwater permit. Dan Stefani, you want to speak to this?
Yes, thank you, Alderwood. On the agenda tonight is the request for approval of the annual CMAR. It's the report card of our sanitary sewer system. We have to fill this out once a year as required by the DNR. And it appears before City Council because they seek a resolution that proves that City Council was presented with the report card. That way the DNR can account for the City Council knowing the condition of our sewer system. So that being said, this appears every year this time. We do have a grade of an A, which is very good for our collection system. We don't need any immediate attention to repair old items, broken down pumps and things of that nature. Our maintenance plan does a good job of keeping on top of the pumping stations out in the system. But I'm going to go through some of the key points of the program. I'm not going to highlight or touch base on every component of the CMAR, just the key points. Part of the CMAR that they look for is to see that we have dedicated funding to cover any pumps that go down, things like that. And on page 2, it would be under the financial management section. We do have financial contribution every year of $25,000 in a sanitary sewer system to cover any costs that come about during the year. Last year, we spent just over $9,400 to maintain some key components of the system, mainly the high-level transducer, which levels or takes the level of the water in the wet well that tells the pump to kick on. So it's a signal that starts the pump. We've replaced the impeller bearings and the seals on some of the lift stations. They touch on future planning of the sewer system, and we cover that in the financial section as well. This year, we are doing McKenna Road reconstruction, and we're replacing 1,355 feet of sanitary sewer main. We did have on the capital budget initially for this year to eliminate the Onderdonk lift station, which is on Copps Avenue. That was taken out by the mayor last year. It'll be reintroduced shortly to be put back in the budget for next year. A few years ago, MSD installed a new interceptor main down Copps Avenue, which eliminates the need for this lift station. So we want to proceed with eliminating it, which would save us money every year in operations and maintenance of the lift station. And also have the sewer main lining repair project. We've been working with MSA for 2 years, identifying weak points in the sanitary sewer system that have cracks in the main and sources of inflow and infiltration. So we're going to keep tackling that in the future. That is unnecessary clear water that passes to the treatment that doesn't need to be treated. So we want to eliminate that. The report also covers the electricity and natural gas consumed at all the lift stations. This is relatively new. I think this is the second year that we have to account for that. In the operations and maintenance section, we identify our goals of the program. We identify the maintenance that we've completed. Last year, we completed 2.3% of our system for cleaning. We televised nearly 23% of the system. We inspected roughly 6% of the manholes in the system. So it's a good indicator, a good report card, tells the city council and tells the DNR what we've accomplished with the sewer system. One item you might have noticed on here is the total precipitation last year. We've had 6.4 inches. It says the annual average precipitation is 38 inches. That used to be 36. That has gone up in the past 2 years. Seeing a lot more precipitation in our area, and which impacts our sanitary sewer system because the groundwater levels are higher, which puts more pressure on the sewer system and introduces more sources of I&I. So we want to stay on top of that too, to continue to identify the weak links in our sanitary sewer system, fix them, and get rid of the I&I. That's basically it for the report card. Like I said, we have a report card of an A, which is very good for the DNR and for the city. So if there's any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
Anyone have any questions? All right. This is on just our first read tonight.
Right.
The next item is 2B, consideration of resolution 20-7-2424, award a bid for City Hall and Library HVAC upgrades. This is start for immediate action. It's presented by the city administrator and Brad Broom. Is there a motion to take this out of order?
I'll move to take it out of order.
I'll second.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? And is there, that passes.
Move
Is there
approval.
a
Second.
second? Okay. Brad or Brian, you want to go ahead? You're muted.
Yeah,
Oh,
I can go. So the bid award came in under budget. There is a large discrepancy between the lowest bidder and the next lowest bidder. We did do our homework. We had Strand look into their past projects. They reached out to the owner. The owner was asked if they were comfortable with their bid, if they had any questions, if they had any concerns about the bid manual, the project manual. They did not. They felt comfortable with it. I did some research into past projects that they've done as well. They've done projects very, very similar, very large projects, small projects. So they're a commercial HVAC company, and I feel comfortable with their bid and the company. Strand has worked with them before. So all things considered, I suggest moving forward and awarding this bidder, AirTemp Services, Inc. The reason it started for first read this evening and immediate action is that the unit that we need to get ordered needs at least a 10-week lead time, and that's pre-COVID. There is potential that it could be longer than that. The unit is not a typical unit. It's a fairly good sized HVAC unit. And a unique thing about this is that all the rooftop units at the library not only heat, but they also cool. So they're both functions for the library, and there's 5 of them. This is the largest. It feeds the main part of the library where all the offices are, the children's library area, the bathroom or 2 bathrooms, and the front desk. So basically everything that's the original library on the upper level is fed by this unit. So it's a substantial unit. It's very important. It's very much in need of getting replaced. And so this was our priority. This did go through facilities committee a couple times, several times, or 2 times at least last year, if not more. And I sent it via email to the facilities committee this spring in the middle of everything that was going on with COVID and the safer at home order. So I did get some feedback from the committee. I did consider that. I passed it along to our engineer. We did incorporate a couple of those items into the project manual. Other than that, it's a fairly straightforward HVAC project. And the subcontractor of the prime contractor is the parent company for that currently services City Hall and the community center for HVAC controls. So they're the ones that provide the programming for the systems, the mechanical systems. So we're also obviously comfortable with them, and we've worked with them several times. So does anybody have any questions about the project or the bid?
Jen? Alder Curry.
Brad, are you anticipating that the library is going to have to be closed for any period of time during this installation?
No, in the project manual, it states that the library has to be allowed to be in operation typical for their normal business hours.
Okay.
They do have to remove the unit that exists on the rooftop, which means that there will literally be a very big hole in the roof where the unit gets removed. That is temporary. Obviously, they will schedule as best as possible around any type of weather, and it should not take more than a day to pick the old unit off and place the new unit on. So it should be buttoned up fairly quickly. And there is language in the project manual that covers, whether if there's, damage or anything like that, it is covered, in the project manual. The contractor is responsible for that.
Great, thanks.
Anybody else? All right.
Nancy's got a
Got
question.
my hand up.
Oh, you did. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's all right. Brad, as I know that our bids often come through with an itemized, itemized against our specs. Do you have a sense of, since it is such a gigantic gap between this bid and the other bids, do you have a sense of where that gap came from? Is it in labor costs, or is it in I mean, why, I mean, I know that there's confidence in this particular contractor. On the other hand, it would just, I guess it would make me feel a little better if we had a sense of where that was coming from.
Yeah, so this project, and this is actually somewhat typical of small facilities related projects, any kind of upgrades or repairs or renovations. They do a lump sum bid instead of an itemized bid.
Okay.
So it's difficult to pick out where they're getting their cost savings.
So
And
even
it's hard
even when you talk to them post the bid to kind of reassure yourself, you didn't get a sense of where it was coming from.
No, I think that I really do think that it's coming from using the subcontractor Complete Control, who is very familiar with the city's facilities. They put together our original HVAC controls quote. At that time, they were Vesta. Vesta was essentially bought out by the parent company. So it was a small company, and then the parent company bought them out. So Complete Control, for all necessary purposes, is essentially Vesta at this point. And so they know the facility, they know the bid, they quoted it. Their people walked through the entire project with us and Strand. So I have a feeling that they're anticipating getting a lot of cost savings there in the HVAC controls portion, not necessarily the mechanical portion, but that's all speculation. I can't speak for the contractor.
Thank you.
All right. Anyone else have questions? Alder Schilling.
I just want to make a comment and thank Brad for doing all of that homework. That was a lot of homework. And just so people realize, you potentially saved our taxpayers about $95,000 in doing that. And I appreciate the work that you put into that.
Yep, no problem. Thank you.
Right. Yeah, I think it always makes you a little bit nervous when we get a bid that's that good, but I think having done the due diligence on it, I think we should just feel fortunate.
It might be important to preface that Strand did warn me going into this that they've seen bids all over the place with previous projects that were bid out in the spring with COVID and everything that's going on. They've seen extremely high, and then in the same exact bid, extremely low. So it's like some companies are being very, very cautious in bidding their projects, and some companies are very maybe desperate to get business. And I mean, they did kind of give me that, warning ahead of time. So I guess I wasn't very surprised altogether when I saw that the bids were, different by such a great margin. But I'm guessing that, everything is covered by the project manual. There should be no surprises. There is cash allowances in the project manual that we budgeted for. And we got a lot of room to spare in our budget right now. So I'm comfortable with it. I think that we'll have a good product all said and done and come in under budget, which is great.
All right. Anyone else? And I believe this is a roll call vote.
Correct.
Yes.
The clerk would call the roll.
Alder Moore,
Aye.
Alder Schilling,
Aye.
Alder Kur,
Aye.
Alder Thomas,
Aye.
Alder Groupie,
Aye.
Motion carries. Thanks, Brad.
All right, thank you. Have a good night.
You too. The next item is 2C, and I would note this is not started for immediate action, so I would not anticipate any action on this tonight. 2C is consideration of resolution 20-7-2422 enforcing encroachment of structures at 1224 Birchhaven Circle onto city property from the Parks and Recreation Board. And I guess what I would propose that we do is have Jake Anderson, the Parks Director, speak to this initially, and Alder Groupie and I could explain what the Parks Board action Cook, and then give the Novaks a chance to speak and to see if anybody has questions of them. So, Jake, you want to go ahead?
You bet. Thank you, Council President Wood. On page 148 of your packet, I think kind of has the information regarding the encroachment from 1224 Birchhaven Circle. Included in the packet is a site survey of the property, some physical pictures, and then a recount of the July 14th Park and Recreation Board meeting. So the Novaks went for a variance for a home addition, revealed a survey with 2 encroaching structures, one being a shed on the property line, the other being a boat lift, approximately 14.1 feet over the property line. Historically, that part of that property on the southern end of Winnequa Park, at the corner of Healy Lane and Winnequa Road, was kind of separated by a rock swale, a real low drainage spot. So by visual eye, it looked like and was maintained by the previous property owners as part of the private yard. So based on just kind of using our GIS, I estimated about 0.2 acres of city property was kind of being captured into what you see in your packet tonight. Parks Board on July 14th had a good discussion, and Doug Plowman from our city planner is on the line that can answer any of your questions that you might have regarding the variance in the ZBA case. But at the end, there was 2 failed motions, similar into what the Parks Board intent was. The motion that passed was to enforce the encroachment of the boat lift and have it removed, but allow the shed on a year-to-year lease until the property is sold. What was included in this council packet, not in the Park Board packet, was some of the original documentation on a building permit that was secured back in 1996 or 1997. I'm sorry, for the actual shed itself. I think the application showed incorrect property lines and possibly location of the shed. But the Parks Board, I believe, took that into consideration on allowing for a yearly lease of that, of a lease of the park property where the shed encroaches on. I think that's all I got from my end. I'd turn over to maybe Molly and Doug for any clarifications.
All right, Doug Plowman, did you have anything to add to anything that Jake said?
I think I would just just clarify as well that the addition that the Novaks applied for the ZBA, that was on the south side, and it showed, it was for a two bedroom addition to the property, and that was really when this encroachment came up. That was considered as a part of the potential hardship, was the possible removal of the shed and the loss of storage space there. In the consideration and sort of the subsequent approval of the ZBA action there. And that was approved in late April. And I think I would just echo what Jake said as well there about the application. We can see building permits and approvals for the shed with an incorrect site plan that was submitted. And we don't have records specifically for the boat lift, the boat launch. In present day, with our code, we would need certain permits for that, not specifically maybe a building permit per se, but we would need electrical for the work that's down there, as well as DNR permits, and there was no record of that anywhere to be found in the property file.
All right, thank you. Alder Thomas, why don't you let Alder Groupie and I talk a little bit about the Parks Board before we get into the questions. So, Alder Groupie.
Doug, do you want to, or Council President Wood, would you like to start, or should I just give some comments about our conversation last week?
You go ahead.
So the Parks Board deliberated for a very long time about this. As we discussed with City Planner Plowman and Parks Director Anderson, there are probably dozens of similar encroachments in the city, which we will eventually have to address and make decisions on moving forward. The reason why we gave an exception for the shed in this case is because it's such a small encroachment, less than 4 feet, but also the Novaks expressed to us how direly they need this space for storage. It is a house without a basement, which they knew when they purchased the home. But they also, were not clear about whether or not they had originally had the property surveyed when they purchased the house. They couldn't recall having done that. And they inherited these encroaching structures when they purchased the house. We understand that it is a hardship. We're so grateful for, they were willing to be extremely cooperative with the city. They have been great stewards of the land around their home, despite it being public land for everybody to use. But we just figured with trying to set a precedent for keeping the land public and open green space for all, the encroachment of 14 plus feet for the boat lift / launch was just too great of an impediment to ensuring that land was for the public and not considered part of the Novak property. So we felt we were doing our best to accommodate the Novaks and keeping some of their storage space that they described as being pretty essential to their needs, but also to ensuring that we have a solid precedent for how we deal with these types of requests. As City Planner Plowman mentioned, it was sort of a perfect storm of things where the original permit was submitted for the shed, but the dimensions were incorrect, and it was sort of a, just sort of a hand-drawn, request. And so we said, given that the city had approved originally a permit for the shed, despite the fact that it was incorrect dimensions, that we would honor that for them, because that was an official transaction that occurred between the property owners at the time and the city. We don't have that for the lift, as City Planner Plowman mentioned, and so we decided that that was just an additional case for removing the encroaching structure from their property.
Yeah, good summary. I don't really have much to add. I think to me, one of the biggest concerns is because we're going to be dealing with a lot of other encroachments into parks, many of them that are also long-standing. And if we, start out by allowing a pretty significant encroachment here, it's, difficult then to go back and say no to other people. So, Alder Thomas, did you have a question first, or I'd like to get the Novaks?
I'll listen to the Novaks and then I'll raise my questions.
Okay, would you first introduce yourselves, and your address is obviously 1224 Birchhaven, and then just go ahead with your comments that you have.
Well, thank you for your time tonight. I'm Nick. I'm here with my wife, Katie.
Hi.
We've been here for 4 years. Like you said before, Alder Groupie, we inherited these two structures that we didn't know that were on city or public property. We left the last meeting feeling a little bit frustrated and unsettled by the recommendations of the park rec board. If you could put yourself in our shoes, that's these are two structures that have been here for one of them over 23 years, the other one close to 30 years, and the shed was approved. We have the permits here, and we really feel that the shed should be either granted an easement just because it was approved by the city. And the boat lift, although we don't have any sort of record of it, it's on a concrete slab with a steel welded structure that reaches out 30 plus feet into the water. So, to remove that, that's going to potentially rip up shoreline. We wouldn't feel very comfortable without getting DNR involved, because that's the last thing we would want to do, is do the wrong thing by tearing that up and potentially causing other issues. Katie, do you have anything to add?
As far as moving we love the water, we love the community, and boating is a big part of our life. And if we removed the lift from that area, we would have to do a lift into the water, and the two companies in Madison won't come down this channel anymore because it's too narrow. So it would really cause a big hardship for us, and cause a lot of problems, really.
And we just really hope you guys consider or reconsider the Parks and Rec decision, and be in favor of us being able to at least keep both of these two long-standing structures, especially the shed, since we have a permit for it, and it was granted by the city 23 years ago.
Okay. Alder Thomas, do you have a question or
I
comment?
had a couple of questions. Did the park board consider offering the part that the shed is on, offering to sell like 3 feet to the petitioners?
The three options were removal.
I'm asking Jake.
Oh, sorry.
Excuse me. Jake,
Alder Thomas, no, that was not an option. We had, I think, previous request at alternate locations for the purchase of feet of park property to be able to put in piers, etc. And that was historically a non-starter at the Parks Board level.
Okay, thank you. And I have a question for the city attorney. Do we run into any issues with riparian rights here?
With riparian rights? No. The shoreline that the property owners own, they are the riparian owners of that. We are the riparian owners of the parkland property as it abuts the lot. So no, DNR would undoubtedly be involved to the extent it involves the water.
Okay, so I may be using the wrong term, but I recall down on Belle Isle, when the city lost, there were some people who were using parkland for personal purposes, and they made claim to it because they had been maintaining it.
Yeah, you're referring to adverse possession.
Okay, so do we run into any problems with adverse possession on this?
No, under current law, you can't adversely possess municipal property except under extremely limited circumstances that wouldn't apply here.
Okay. Okay, that's the extent of my questions.
Okay.
Although I will make a statement, and I will say that I have, since 1969, lived adjacent to park property. And one of the first things my husband and I have always done is to make sure that we know where the park ends and where our property begins. There's a stake there. There's a stake, at least in all of the properties I've ever lived on, where the park begins. So there's no question in my mind that I would be encroaching on parkland, because I know where my property ends and the park begins. And I don't know why other people who live adjacent to parks, why they don't do the same thing.
Okay. Alder Schilling.
I was wondering, are there any plans in place for that swath of land that borders their property? I know it's kind of an extension of the parking area and a little bit south of the parking area. Are there any current plans? I thought I'd heard that maybe the city was looking at doing a kayak launch there.
Alder Schilling, yes, we have a conceptual master plan for development of that end of the park, including a revamped parking lot, kayak launch, and fishing pier. It was originally introduced into the 2020 capital budget, but removed at that point as far as from consideration. It's not included at this time in the 2021 capital budget, but we do have some renderings of what some redevelopment of that area could look like, only for the fact that it would be, we could do something on that part south of Winnequa Road, regardless of what we do for the rest of Winnequa Park.
And I think it takes about 3 years for a park project to come to come to reality?
That's correct.
You know, I went over there this weekend because I wasn't real familiar with the piece of property and I wanted to see it for myself. And I see there's a really large electrical box that is right, I'm guessing that's on city property, right up inches from their boat lift slab. And so I was trying to picture where this kayak launch would go. And it seems like it would definitely have to be on the north side of that boundary line. I felt like this is definitely a unique situation. And I'm wondering how many times this kind of issue has come forward in Monona in the past.
I can answer that with deference to maybe Attorney Cole. We have, I mean, 2005, we had a property that was a house that was built partly on park property at Toniwatha Trail Boat Launch. In 2009, I believe, my second year here, we had both Maywood Park and Winnequa Park surveyed for potential encroachment issues, and there was multiple properties identified with landscaping. Mostly landscaping is what it comes to. Sometimes it's sheds or fences, etc., that might be on city property. We don't proactively go out and survey individual parks for encroachment violations. Typically, when we do a project like Oneida Park, for example, we had that whole park surveyed and identify potential encroachments, or at least know where the property ends were. I anticipate that we have 3 to 5 additional park properties that have encroachment issues, not with permanent structures like in this case, but generally more landscaping and utilizing the park as private property.
Okay, thank you. I think, you know, I definitely respect the power of precedent-setting decisions. I personally feel like this is one that we could look at on an individual basis because it is so unique. The Novaks, they clean up all of the debris that is, you know, left by fishermen, and the neighbors are very grateful to them for the kind of the courteous acts that they provide to the city as a benefit, and, you know, of having that boat lift there. And so I definitely was appreciative of that. I just feel like, you know, I don't know that piece of land is going to be a useful piece to the city, and it kind of seems mean to take it out to me, you know. And I would say unless I would lean toward unless we're, you know, need that land for something, and they refuse to start, you know, to keep maintaining it. I just don't see why this is necessary.
So, Jake, could you provide a copy of that concept master plan to the council before the next meeting? Would be useful. And I think Alder Schilling, in response, I think it's in regard to your comments there. If you look on page 161 of the packet, there's a sort of triangular red outline that shows the encroachment, and that's the area that they're currently maintaining. I mean, I don't know that they need all that.
We're not asking for that.
We don't want the land. We just want our boat lift and our shed. We're not trying to take over the park or by any means. I mean, this is just an issue that we inherited. We just want our launch and our shed. We're not trying to take land in that way.
Right.
And no one's communicated with us either. You know, if this was really an issue, that would have been a simple email or knock on the door, and I'd be happy to stop cutting the grass and, you know, remulching that wooded area over there as well.
And if you see the red property line, it goes diagonally right through the boat lift. What you can't see, though, there's the tree that borders that, and there's a huge electrical box as well, right there. So that piece right there, I guess I find it really hard to believe that we would ever use that triangle the amount that of, pain and suffering it's going to cause for this family that's trying to fill a gap in our middle housing. And, I appreciate that they're trying to make those efforts and that they've been caring for that area for this long.
Thank you.
Or city attorney. Almost turned you into an alderman there, the city attorney. Cole.
Doug, the only thing that I would mention, to the extent there's any thought to sell the encroaching area to the property owners, we have to keep in mind that this is parkland. There can be limitations on our ability to sell parkland. We would have to look at how we acquired it. I believe most of Winnequa at one time was a landfill. My assumption would be it was donated to the city, and it certainly could have been donated with conditions. Oftentimes parkland is donated on the condition that it remain for recreational purposes. So I only raise that to say if the council is considering at all the sale of any land, we would need to research our ability to do that, even if that was what the council wanted to do.
Would that apply with regard to an easement as well?
It would not.
Okay. Alder Groupie?
I just want to reiterate, we deliberated as a Parks Board for a very long time about this, and it's not with the intention of being punitive, but it is very essential that we preserve our public park space for everyone in the city. And this may seem like a small issue or nitpicking, but I think allowing for the shed was a compromise. We had talked about not providing any sort of, allowances for either encroaching structure. And in fact, I just think first it starts as 14 feet for a boat launch. And then I think it's very easy for people to make a case. We talk about setting precedent, and that is true. I think it's very easy to cross the line about what is just something that is for your use. Boating is a luxury, and this is going to be a hardship, and it is unfortunate that the circumstances are such as they are. But the shed space is what they said was most essential to them, and so we felt that was an important consideration to make. I think it's also just worth saying that we had another person who had requested an easement for a fence that abutted part of Winnequa Park, and after hearing our long discussion with the Novaks, they withdrew their request because they said, this is just something that would be a nice convenience for us, but we understand that the park space is more important than this. And so even already, people are starting to see that it has to be a special request or special circumstances for them to try to encroach on this public space. And again, it's hard not to sound clinical or, uncaring about it, but I think that's just sort of how we have to approach it when we know we're going to be dealing with, as I said, potentially dozens of more cases like this. But, I think we were all very sympathetic to the Novaks and are regretful that, these circumstances were placed upon them when they purchased the home.
Alder Schilling. I'm sorry, Alder Moore and then Alder Schilling.
Okay, thank you. First of all, I want to say, Nick and Katie, thank you for the work you have done on cleaning up and all of that. Really, very much appreciated. I'm wondering, it's not clear to me in looking at the shed design. Is it on a slab? Is the shed on a slab?
Yes.
It is. Okay. So I was just thinking about a trade-off of like, okay, could we move the shed and leave the ramp as opposed to the other way around? As opposed to tackling both. I guess a couple of things come to mind for me. One is that while I appreciate that it may not be within our purview, it certainly seems to me that perhaps to Alder Thomas's point, when because this is it tends to be a frequent issue, it just seems to me that when people purchase property that abuts one of our public spaces, that perhaps we could build something in, whether it's through working with a realtor or working with, you know, with through the zoning mission or whatever that requires somebody prior to purchasing the property to have a survey done. Because it certainly seems to me that having spent $400 on a survey, for instance, if Nick and Katie had spent $400 on a survey before they purchased the home, and found out that this encroachment existed, that that perhaps we would have avoided this, or we could be more proactive in making, rather than, you know, waiting until somebody's over the property line, and that because it abuts our public property, that maybe there's some way process-wise that we could avoid this in the future. I'm not exactly sure how that would be, but again, since we know that this is a problem, it's much easier to deal with it before it becomes, you know, than to, you know, to be talking, whether it's somebody's landscaping that's over the line or somebody's fence that's over the line, after it's already been installed, or after somebody's already purchased the property with a structure that's been there for 31 years. It just makes sense to me, if we can be more proactive in the future, that would help. And beyond that, I'm really sympathetic because it is something that's been there for so long. You know, it's a really tough call, and I appreciate the deliberations of the Park and Rec board in this. I'm glad we were able to make accommodations.
Thank you. Alder Schilling, did you want to say something, and then Alder?
I just wanted to say, you know, if we recognize how difficult this is for us, think about the park board who has to do these multiple times. And if they'd have turned them down flat, it never would have come to us. And these are very difficult decisions, but we are the protectors of the public space. And you're right, Alder Moore, we maybe need to talk to title companies or real estate companies and make sure we have the stakes out there so this doesn't happen, because you can be as sympathetic as you want, and I think we all are. But we also have, you know, several thousand people in the community whose interests we have to protect. So I share Alder Groupie's comments about Park Board and the difficulty it is for them to deal with these problems, particularly when they weren't of the making of the petitioners.
Okay, Alder Schilling.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, yeah, hindsight is 2020. There's no doubt about it. Unfortunately, that's not our luxury right now. And I was at the Parks Board meeting, and I did hear the long discussion, and I appreciate you guys, you know, exploring every avenue. I feel like the gentleman who withdrew with the fence, you know, a fence is not a permanent structure. And I feel like that's where this is unique. Both the shed and the boat lift, they have concrete slabs, and the boat lift, there's nowhere else on your property for that to go. And I just think that's the difference is these are permanent structures. These mistakes were made probably before any of us were involved here. Well, maybe Kathy was 1997 or, you know, 30 years ago, whatever. But I just, that's my position on it.
Alder Kerr.
I have a question for the Novaks. I'm sorry. Have you done any improvements to the boat lift since you've been in the house 4 years?
I've painted it, and I always pressure wash it every year. Other than, yeah, just really maintaining it. Yeah, when we got it, it was really rusty. The bunks were all rotted out. I replaced those, and yeah, we just take pride in our area and maintain / enhance everything that we have.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I guess one comment I would just kind of in response to Alder Schilling's comment the problem is we had somebody a long time ago who came in and put something in the park where they, in one case, they had a permit, whether the structure was built where the permit said is not really clear, but the city did issue that permit. We don't have a record whether there was a permit for the other structure, but clearly they're both in the park. And to say, well, then because it's been there a long time and this wasn't brought to the city's attention, that it's okay. I think that's kind of, we've identified where the park board struggled with this, of trying to protect the public space, but also recognizing the situation of the Novak. So. Anybody else have anything else or more?
Doug, yeah, so Jake, are you aware of any other encroachments that are this extreme into our property? I mean, we've talked about the landscaping, obviously the shed is 3 feet, but are there other encroachments that would constitute kind of a 14-foot? And certainly even in terms of the degree to which it encroaches, and also I guess even something that is this permanent of a structure. Are you familiar with anything else in the city in that regard on our park property?
As far as permanent structure, no. This would probably be the most severe. Also, 15 feet roughly of shoreline of lake, water access is probably one of the more severe cases that I know about currently. Of most of our boundary issues that we have might be 3 or 4 feet, maybe discrepancy in what the maps say and how things are being maintained. So this would be a case, but it's a challenge all over the system with adjacent property owners to parks and how they landscape where fences are put and how we maintain that relationship with the property owners next to a park. And so I see it from mowing a few extra strips to having the parks treated as part of their yard with, fertilizer treatment. So it looks like private property next to, maybe the weeds of a park. It can be confusing for our seasonal staff who mow and maintain the parks on, we can't fence every single public parcel that we have. So it has gotten increasingly more challenging over the last decade. And I do think that we're probably losing usable feet of our park space as a whole due to this issue.
Thank you. So I guess I raised that from the standpoint of, again, I am not at all suggesting that we should accept encroachments as a matter of course. And in fact, as I just said, I think we should be doing what we can to prevent it to start. And certainly if it's just somebody taking advantage of the situation. I mean, if Nick and Katie had put this boat launch in themselves, trying to get away with something, it would be a different story. But, on the Plan Commission, as you all undoubtedly know, one of the things that we do frequently to guard against setting precedents in a direction, in an uncomfortable direction, is findings of fact. We separate out one situation from another. As city planner Plowman knows, so that it doesn't become a dangerous precedent in terms of somebody else's structure. And I just throw that out there because certainly in this instance, there could be a finding of fact. I'm not suggesting that Again, that this is a, but I'm just saying there could be a finding of fact in this instance where because this structure has been there for 31 years and it's not something that Nick and Katie did, nor something that, and frankly, it's something that the city should have paid attention to. I mean, I can't believe that it sat there for 31 years without anybody noticing it. It's a pretty big structure to even with a tree, you know, not to be noticeable that one possibility might be to create a finding of fact that would, again, not set a dangerous precedent towards any other property owner that abuts a park. I just tossed that out. And I'm wondering, did the Parks Board consider such a thing?
I have a point of order.
Alder Thomas.
I'm reading the resolution. It talks about the shed. I do not see anything here for us to be overturning or dealing with the boat launch. And if that's the case, it's not on the agenda. I'm not sure it's our responsibility to address that. If there's a basis for appeal, what is on here is the shed, but not the boat launch.
Okay, well, that's a good question. City Administrator Gatto.
Yes, it's listed under the fourth whereas clause in the resolution. It says the Parks and Rec Commission Board at its July 14th meeting recommended the shed be allowed to remain under a year-to-year license with removal at either time of sale of the property or request of the city on the condition that the encroaching boat lift be removed at the owner's expense.
Right, which is also included at the end of the now therefore be it resolved clause. So, all right, well, we're not going to vote on this tonight. We will be taking it up again at the August 3rd meeting. I did want to mention that we had received an email from Dan Jaworski, I believe is a neighbor of the Novaks, in support of allowing them to retain both structures. And I'll make sure that I forwarded it to the city clerk, and we'll make sure that everybody gets that. So does anybody have anything else they want to say on this tonight, or can? All right, well, thanks very much to the Nick and Katie for coming again, and I guess we'll see you in a couple weeks.
Thank you so much for your time. We greatly appreciate it.
You bet. Thank you.
Wonderful night. Thank you.
Yep, you do. Okay. 2D is consideration of resolution 20-7-2425, approving a proposal from Strand Associates for engineering design for improvements at Stonebridge Park and at the Monona Community Center loading dock from the Park and Recs Board, and this is start for immediate action. Is there a motion?
Move to suspend the rules and take this item out of order.
I'll second.
All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Right.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Is there a motion on the main item?
Move approval.
Second.
Okay. Jake?
All right, thank you, Council President Wood. This is a two-project engineering proposal from Strand and Associates. The loading dock or the dumpster enclosure and the pathway up to the kitchen. In the capital budget, it was approved to revisit the accessibility to the back of the building and take care of the ramp that leads toward the dumpster enclosure. That's the easy one. Because that was a small project, it would be coupled with Stonebridge Park for bidding out. The project, Stonebridge, has two components, as you are aware, the stormwater phosphorus reduction component and then the park design component, both included in this year's capital budget. So once the coordination between the stormwater vault structure that's being proposed, location and how that blends into the request of the Parks and Recreation Board, it's anticipated that we'll have a conceptual rendering at our August Parks Board meeting. At that point, we would have a public hearing, public input over that design and the details surrounding it. So this is a design order to basically take care of all the engineering work and the design based on feedback from committee work. It does include work around the pagoda, restoration, site work, grading, etc. Does not include designing the replacement concrete cap system for the pagoda. That is currently being taken care of through the Landmarks Commission with one of their, I think, architects or designers. So it is anticipated, though, that we would include the cost for the cap in this park project and coordinate with contracts. I wouldn't anticipate that the pagoda restoration work would be part of the overall construction contract, just because of the complexities and niche work of how that's being done. But this design work's anticipated to be done through the month of August with a better opinion of probable costs for the capital budget process. And this was recommended for approval at the July 14th Park Board meeting.
Okay. Yeah, I would just say that the Parks Board's definitely very aware of the pagoda being there and some of the issues. We talked about some of those that have been raised. Alder Kerr, did you want to say something?
Well, I just wanted to bring up, there were a lot of concerns at the Landmarks Commission about the grading around the pagoda. So I want to make sure that that's included in the request for proposal from Strand, that there's some sensitivity because of the spring, that any kind of regrading may impact the spring. And as it's a specific feature to the pagoda, we wouldn't want to have a new pagoda with no spring. So if that could just be highlighted in some way when that request is sent out for a proposal. I had hoped that the Parks Board and the Landmarks Commission were going to be able to have a joint meeting to discuss this, but I think with COVID that didn't happen. I would urge that the Landmarks Commission is invited to the August meeting if that's when the design is discussed. Because I think it's important that they're part of the conversation. There's some very strong opinions on that group. There have been some longstanding members who've been wanting this project to be completed for some time. And so I think that it would be good to have them involved. I understand that, well, I'll just leave it at that.
Right. I know one of the former members of the Landmarks Commission who's very interested in it is the mayor. So, Jake, could you maybe just speak to when you think, I mean, when we will see plans back from Strand? That would be a good time to invite, have a joint meeting with Landmarks.
Well, as long as you approve their contract tonight, then they can start working and
right
on the concept plan. So until we have a signed contract, we can't start moving forward with a final conceptual draft. So ideally, their subcontractor that's going to be doing the landscape architecture renderings will start on it in August. So I would anticipate it would be, that Thursday, Friday before the Parks Board meeting, which I think is August. I don't know what date it is, but the second Tuesday in August, 11th. Yeah, so somewhere 7, 8 type of deal in there. We'd have that initial rendering with some of our previous feedback. But speaking to Alder Kerr, the Parks Board, we've all heard a lot of the landmark feedback. The pagoda is a priority for protection, for the flow of water through the pagoda area, to the point of, I think the majority of the design work will be staying away from that. There's still discussion about whether that will be considered a wetland area or not. So on how much we can actually even do there. So all that will be discussed and investigated through the permitting process and the design process.
Thank you.
Doug Plowman, and then I come back to Alder Schilling. But Doug, I just wanted to give you a chance if you had anything you wanted to add with regard to the pagoda and the Landmarks Commission.
Yeah, I think Jake had really given a good overview there. He and I have been in touch. We were, you know, aiming for an April meeting for a joint meeting with the Parks Board and the Landmarks Commission, and obviously that has pushed out. But we are, I think, Jake and I are emailing today that August is most likely going to be that date. So they're aware of it and sort of being kept apprised with what's going on. And you know, concurrently, I'm working on the roof structure as well, trying to get that potentially put a request in for 2021. So I think there's a lot of opportunity here to kind of work these two together and to minimize disruption to the park and have it all completed at the same time.
Okay, Alder Schilling.
Yeah, I was just wondering, so I believe there's an opportunity for public input on the design coming in August, I'd heard. And I was wondering, so that'll happen though after the initial design is presented, or will that happen before the initial design?
That'll happen at the meeting. We've had multiple, I think, public input meetings regarding Stonebridge Park. That the challenge is, the change, I guess, was in moving from a RSC system for stormwater phosphorus reduction management to this underground vault. So that kind of changed gears a little bit from our last year's capital budget and some of the conceptual plans that we had that we received public input for. And I think at this point, we took those into consideration with the design, but ideally it's better to have something to look at and to say, I like this A, B, or C, or I don't like this, as far as the public input hearing goes.
And then one point, at the Plan Commission, Chris Homburg had mentioned that the county, maybe Alder Moore can help me on this, I'm remembering, he mentioned that the county is looking at altering all of their stormwater management and some other, do you recall that, Nancy?
Yeah.
Kind of a comprehensive review of that?
Yes. You know, the sum and the substance, no surprise to this group is that they're up in their game. They're talking about raising the standards even more and stormwater management, because it's such, you know, obviously our lakes are not getting any better. So, and I know Stonebridge is a big part of our overall plan for stormwater management. We've got, you know, a variety of different projects in the hopper to do our part and to meet the standards. So, and it sounds like the vault as we haven't seen the previous plans, and now having gone to the and sitting next to a whitewater park when my culvert lets go with water, it sounds like the vault is a better option. Yes, Jake, in terms of the stormwater control overall, is it better? Is it a better option?
Correct. Administrator Gatto can.
I was going to say it provides more treatment opportunities than the RSC system that we were looking at before.
Correct.
So I would equate it to more of a better bang for our dollar investment.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was implying. So in that regard, though, is this strand contract, does it also include since it's the engineering for, I assume, for the whole redesign of the park, yes? Does it include also what previously we had talked about, putting another one of the big centrifuges, if you will, in the street like we did out in front of Schluter as part of that stormwater management? So is this strand contract going from street all the way to the park or just doing the park? You understand what I'm saying, Jake?
This contract is only for park design work. The stormwater management contract would be separate under Public Works.
So, but you're talking about the design work for, the engineering design work for the park related to stormwater, yes?
Yeah, I think what I was mentioning is that the stormwater vault structure, how it gets placed in the park would determine how some of the design of the park, what we could do within the park as far as design.
Yep, Alder Groupie and then Alder Brewer.
I'll let Alder Kaur go first. I think she has a public works comment, so.
Okay.
Yeah, it's brief. The difference now with this project, the stormwater project was much more involved previously. And so it really shaped the park. The stormwater project now is different. And so it's driving less of the features of the park. And so that's why these are two separate items. One doesn't necessarily determine the other, though they do go hand in hand, not to the extent that we saw previously.
Okay, thank you.
Right. Alder Groupie.
So I'll make my comment brief too, but we've received a lot of feedback from members of the council, but also, residents, constituents about sort of the pastiche of features that we have proposed in some capacity as potentially being part of the Stonebridge redesign. And one of the biggest requests that we've gotten is that to have this visual input, which would be, a preliminary plan to present at the August meeting, in addition to, a correlating narrative about how everything would flow together, how the park would be used with these new features. And so I would just say that's another thing that we've been asked for that we hope to deliver at the August meeting to sort of assuage some of these worries about what different things are going to be included and how it will look overall. But it is a starting place. I mean, I think we hope to have something good to share that, feels cohesive and incorporates a lot of the feedback that we've received. But that's the reason why, just to kind of expand on what Jake said, why we want to share something visual and have a narrative to provide before we solicit further feedback from the public next month.
Okay. Anybody else? All right, then all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Oh. City Administrator Gatto? I can't hear you.
You're muted.
Roll call.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Alder Groupie,
Aye.
Alder Moore,
Aye.
Alder Schilling,
She said
Alder
aye.
Schilling,
You're muted.
thank you. Alder Kaur,
Aye.
Alder Thomas,
Aye.
All right, motion passes. Thank you. And we now move on to 2E, consideration of resolution 20-7-2423, authorizing a contract with the Reisling Group for investigation services related to police incident from the city administrator, and this is also started for immediate action. Is there a motion?
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor of the motion to take this out of order, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Is there a motion on
Move
the
approval.
agreement?
Second.
Okay, and we do, there she is. Good evening. Thanks for waiting. Chief Brian, did you want to introduce this?
Yes,
And,
please. Be happy to. Can you hear my audio now?
It's not great, but yeah, kind of.
Okay. So as the resolution notes, at our June 18th meeting, the council adopted a resolution of action in response to the June 2nd police incident. We had 5 action steps. One of the action steps was to contract with an outside firm to provide an investigation of the incident and provide us any feedback from that investigation. So the police chief, myself, and other staff members made numerous contacts with individuals and organizations that do this type of work. Unfortunately, we were only able to get 2 of those individuals and organizations to provide us proposals back. So I've included those in your packet materials. After review of those materials, the mayor and staff felt that the Rising Group would be the appropriate firm for the city to contract with for this particular action item. And the Rising Group has provided us with a proposal for a not to exceed price of $34,000. And in the scope of work that's attached to the resolution, she outlines the various items that are included in that investigation, with the end deliverable being a final report that we would receive in October. Ms. Reisling is with us here on Zoom this evening to answer any specific questions about her firm, and staff and the police chief were available to answer any questions that you might have as well.
Okay. Chief, it's Reisling, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have some comments you wanted to address to the council, and then we'll see if there are questions after that?
No, not really. Pretty straightforward. The situation is such that I completely understand why you want someone from the outside to come in and take a look. I'm more than happy to do that and report back to you what I find.
Okay. Questions? Alder Thomas and then Alder Grippy.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Finance and Personnel approved this but we made 2 amendments to it. The first one being under the overview, it says in the overview, it was determined the individual did have permission to be on the premises. It's not clear. I read that the owner of the property said he was a guest of the tenant, but I think the statement is misleading. So we moved and voted on to remove that sentence from the document, because people could get confused when we say one thing and that says that. The other thing is when it talks on section 5, affected parties, it says citizens of Monona. We have residents, we don't have citizens, and we have some residents who are not citizens. So we moved to change citizens to residents.
Are the first and second on the motion okay with those changes? Yes. I don't remember who the first and second were, so.
I think it was Kathy. I'm sorry. I think it was Alder Thomas and Alder Moore.
Okay, so you're okay with it? Okay. Questions for Chief Reisling?
Older Groupie had her hand before.
Oh, you're right. Yes, I'm sorry. Older group.
So just a couple of points. I mentioned this to Clerk Andrews, but we have Reisling misspelled frequently throughout documentation. I just want to make sure that it's consistent throughout. For example, it's incorrect at the top of the resolution, but then correct within the body of the resolution. I know we all love a good glass of white, but it's not Riesling. So just make sure. The second thing I wanted to mention is that, we've gotten an inquiry about this partnership and whether or not it duplicates the partnership that we are establishing with Nehemiah. They are 2 totally separate things, so it's not really a duplication of services or funds devoted for these things. I just want to make that clear as well. Secondly, it was asked if we were overreacting to the situation by spending money on this independent investigation. And I just want to reiterate also, as many people know, we received an unprecedented number of inquiries about investigating independently this specific police incident. So it was a request made by our community, not, driven as an overreaction, quote unquote, by the city council. And I think that's a very important point to make. We are honoring a request that was made by many, many people in the community to make sure that we examine this from every angle. The last thing I wrote down, I just wanted to ask, is it you or Ms. Reisling, or how would you prefer to be addressed? I just want to make sure.
Well, thank you for caring. That's nice. It's funny world when you work for 25 years as a police chief and your first name is Chief. And then all of a sudden you retire and you find out you have this other first name, which is Sue. So I now answer to both.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to ask you, Chief Sue, I'll just do both to make sure that we're being inclusive here. I wanted to ask, are there any staff members of color with the Riesling Group?
Yes, Deirdre Morgan, who's been assigned to the team, is African American.
Okay. I think, we had hoped that there would be voices of color, and even though one is not representative, I'm grateful to hear that it's not a full panel of, white individuals who are leading this effort. So thank you very much for taking on the job and for your assistance with this. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Alder Thomas and then Alder Moore.
There was one other thing that we talked a little bit about at finance that, as you know, public safety is reviewing the policies, and there's a piece in here that talks about reviewing the policies. And we're very cognizant of not wanting to put the council in the middle. And so we may do all of the policies and wait till the report comes out to send them to council for review and comparison with the report. And I've not talked to you about that, Alder Moore, because it just came up at finance, but we have to be careful that we do this in a thoughtful way.
Well, from my perspective, what we do is we look at the best practices, the most promising practices around the country, and then what the accreditation standards are. So that's how we arrive at what we say. I have no idea, and I'm not in any way trying to question the other group that's looking at this, but that's where we draw our information from as subject experts and what's going on best in the national standards spotlights.
But the council asked the Public Safety Committee to compare some of our policies with the 8 can't wait recommendations.
That certainly is another avenue. I'm just telling you how we do our work.
I think Alder Thomas, we talked about it at finance, the thought was that possibly public safety would hold off on their referring recommendations to the council until they had a chance to see this report.
Right.
Yeah. Alder Moore.
Yeah, so I just, again, in terms of the overlap potentially, first, Chief, welcome. I happen to notice that a lot of your associates come from the student affairs side of thing, and I'm a former student affairs administrator at Northwestern. So I appreciate the background that brings, but I'm wondering a couple of things. One is that my understanding from talking to the mayor is that this primarily is focused on the incident itself and not on a review overall of our police policies. Is that correct?
That's correct. It's very incident focused.
If there are policies in the review, you'll be making recommendations about those specific policies, but you won't be diving into the SOP. Okay, great. And then the second thing is, because I am an independent consultant with partners and associates, can you talk a little bit about the process in terms of how the three of you work together and who's actually going to be doing the work? I get asked all the time, are you the one going to be doing the work, or are you passing it off? So.
No, I probably have 24 people that I work with on a regular basis as associates, but the three of us will do the work. We'll divide up who's going to do the interviews, who's going to do the policy comparisons with best practices. The three of us will do the work. The three of us will write the reports. The three of us will figure out what the best way forward to how to lay it out and how to report to you and what recommendations we will make, if any. Three of us will do the work.
Okay, and just as a follow-up to that, since I'm also someone that relies on best practices, I think it's safe to say that that one of the things that shall we say has been highlighted in the last month or two is that what might have been perceived as best practice previously or best training previously is not necessarily the standard that we should be shooting for. Are you, would you say that there's a sensitivity to that in the work that you're currently doing or that you're anticipating, or?
Absolutely, yeah. Promising practices are always the ones that are, the improving targets. So we do look at promising practices too. So I could tell you right now, one not related to this particular incident, but as an example, the banning of chokeholds and carotid holds and all of those types of things is a best practice in law enforcement.
Right.
Promising practice in that regard is zero with the neck. Absolutely nothing with the neck or head. That's a promising practice. It isn't a best practice, but it's a promising practice. So they do differ, but that's the state of affairs today. The standard is that you can do sleeper holds. That's the standard. So there's differences between standards, best practices, and promising practices. We look at all of them to tell you where you are. So we may conclude that Monona was following the standard practice. It may have been or may not be a best practice or a promising practice, or vice versa. That Monona may be following things that are promising practices, which is great. So we'll put you in that kind of scale, if you will.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, other questions or comments? Chief Estringa, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, just that I know Sue personally from being in Wisconsin for 16 years, and she will not pull back any punches. She'll be brutally honest, and I think you're going to get a fair evaluation of the situation and what our policies are.
Right. That came up in our earlier conversations, and you made that pretty clear that we'd get an honest evaluation. Alder Schilling?
Mine's just a comment in that I hope, we don't limit ourselves to this piece of work, and we consider a more comprehensive approach where we, provide this support to our police department to review all of our policies, look at our ordinances through an equity lens, commit to figuring out ways to increase diversity on our staff and committees, and reviewing budgets. So I would love to see a more comprehensive approach, and that's just my comment.
Right. So you already heard public safety is going to be looking at their standard operating practices and so forth. There's also a proposal that I think we'll probably be seeing in August to establish a new commission, Truth and Reconciliation Commission is the working name at least, to take a broader look at all these kind of issues, city operations and community-wide. And I think we still have to figure out part of how that would fit in with the Nehemiah group work, which I think we'll also hopefully be seeing that in August as well. So good. Yeah,
I am aware of all that. I thought, it might be interesting to explore the idea of having a consultant work up a plan to attack all of this. So that was just my comment.
The commission, we haven't, Chrissy, the charge of the commission is still being worked out with residents of color being in on the conversation as we've been working it out. But it certainly would be our intent that we would, and as Doug said, it's a very comprehensive look, which is to say it includes our hiring practices, it includes our city policies and operational processes, it includes policing, it includes training for city staff, training for us so it includes all of the above, and it is something that, since it's a proposal or a suggestion, recommendation that originally came from Josh Peterson, who's a principal player at American Family. We're already asking American Family how they can support it, both financially and in terms of some personnel support for project management.
Right, but I don't think we want to go too far down that road
Right.
talking about that since it's not on the agenda.
Right. I'm just saying that I'm just giving an overview, and but I'm sure that will include some outside people as well, Christy. to your point.
Right.
Consultants.
Yeah.
Not saying the commission's going to do the work.
Right. Okay, Alder Groupie.
Sorry if I missed it, brief comment, but Alder Moore is referring to the proposed Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And I don't know if that was expressly named, but that is separate from, Public Safety Committee and the Police and Fire Commission. It is a proposed new commission to do some of the work that Alder Schilling was recommending. So I just wanted to make sure we were clear on that.
Yeah. All right, anybody else? All right, seeing none, this is also a roll call vote. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Alder Thomas.
Aye.
Alder Groupie.
Aye.
Alder Moore.
Aye.
Alder Schilling.
Aye.
Alder Coor.
Aye.
Motion passes. All right. Look forward to seeing more of you, Chief Sue.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Yep, good night.
You too. Okay, I think we're down to the item F, discussion and update on staffing, budgetary and city operations contingency plans for COVID-19. City administrators, do you have anything to update us on?
Yeah, just very briefly, I included in your packet materials a copy of our updated personnel and leave policy as it relates to COVID. We did amend this to add in the appropriate language for the mask order from Dane County. So that is in effect at all of our city facilities. So when you see staff out and about in the communities, as you see right now, we are all wearing masks when we're in public buildings or our staff are out in the field. We do have new signage on all of our entrancewways, asking people, the public, if they're coming in to utilize our services, that they also are required to wear a mask. So just so that you are aware of that change as well.
All right, Alder Kerr.
Are we providing masks for staff, or is that something that?
Yes, we do have masks for staff, and we do have a box of masks, for example, at the front counter at City Hall, in case a member of the public would not have one on their person.
Thank you.
All right. Thank
Alder
you.
Moore had a question.
Yeah,
Oh, sorry, Alder Moore.
as it relates to the requirement, is there, who's responsible for enforcing that? Is it since it's a county order, ultimately, is the county the one responsible for enforcing it, or is our police department that's supposed to be enforcing it?
Yeah, thanks for the question. It is not the local police departments. That was made very clear in phone conversations that the police departments have had with Dane County Public Health. We're just supposed to provide information to residents and business owners about it. If someone were to see someone who is not wearing a mask, they are not supposed to go up to that person and confront them. Rather, there's a hotline that they call at Dane County Public Health to report the incident, and they will do a follow-up investigation. But they do not want local law enforcement, enforcing the ordinance in those terms, at least.
Okay, great. Nice.
Okay, all right. Like no other questions on that, then reports of committees, commissions, boards, city administrator, city attorney, and department managers. Alder Groupie. Anything?
Just to reiterate, the next park Parks and Rec Board meeting is Tuesday, August 11th at 6:30, and that will include some of the discussion about Stonebridge Park and design for those improvements. And just in case anyone would care to come or submit comments in advance, participate in that call. Secondly, he's not here anymore, but official congratulations to Chief Ostringa on the announcement of his retirement, and appreciate his cooperation and just all of the work that he's put in his time in Monona.
Thanks. Alder Moore.
I would just want to encourage everybody to take advantage of a new tree donation policy that the city of Monona has. And there's a challenge going on right now, sponsored by the Sustainability Committee. As our community knows, we're losing a lot of trees primarily because of the emerald ash borer. And while we made a commitment as a city to at least stay 1-to-1 with those trees that are coming down, it's a super heavy lift. And we have a tree challenge going on right now. That's all the specifics of that challenge can be found at mymonona.com in the sustainability pages, and it basically encourages anyone to donate to our tree fund, our urban tree fund, forestry fund. You can donate, if you donate $100 or more, we match some of those funds. And also that you can also add to our tree cover here in Monona, since we love being a city of trees, by planting native species in your own yard. And there's a full listing of all the native species that we use here in Monona that we recommend that you can get off the website as well.
All right, thank you. Alder Schilling.
Yeah, for landmarks, this Wednesday at 2 o'clock, so it's July 23rd, the Public Works Department will be placing the mound marker on the northern end of Monona Drive. And it looks fantastic. Doug Plowman, I think, helped select the rock that is that marker, and it looks just fabulous on there. So hope to see a few people there, not too many. We're still working on the pagoda repair estimate, concrete numbers there. The rough estimate we were provided with by Iconica was $20,000 to repair the roof. On the media committee, we're just finalizing a presentation for council, and we're hoping to do that around mid-August, talking about the value of Monona community media, which is incrementally larger now in this COVID world. The presentation looks fantastic, and we'll be bringing that forward in mid-August.
Okay, thank you. Alder Thomas.
It's a public safety meeting Wednesday night, July 22nd at 6 o'clock. I assume it will be long and lively.
Okay. Alder Kerr.
Two things. Public Works is meeting in August. We've had a brief hiatus due to the virus, but we will be back meeting first Wednesday in August. I will say it's probably going to still be a virtual meeting. The other item is with the increased rain events that we've been having, there's been issues with some of the storm drains. So if you notice on your street that the storm drain is clogging with debris, it would be lovely if you could just take a few moments to make sure that that is clear, so that we have less debris going into our lakes. That's helpful. And I just wanted to ask Alder Schilling, that marker for the landmarks for the mound event, I believe that was donated by Homburg, is that correct?
I've not heard that. I've not heard about the donation part. I can't clarify.
I believe that was from Homburg, so thanks to them.
Excellent, thank you.
All right, City Attorney Cole, any report? You're on.
I would just advise, update the council on, as you may recall, there was a federal lawsuit filed challenging the public health COVID orders, the mask order, including the Dane County order. That was dismissed this morning by Judge Griesbach. It was done primarily on procedural grounds, so I don't know that there's much legal substance to it, and I suspect it will get refiled again. But at least as of this morning, that case has been dismissed, and I'd be happy to, if anybody's interested, let me know and I can send you the decision. That's all I have.
Okay, thanks. Alder Kerr?
I'd like it if you'd send me that.
City Administrator Gatto?
I have nothing further to add.
Okay, Alder Groupie, did you want to say something? Or you, oh,
Just seconding the request for Attorney Cole to forward
okay.
along.
Maybe send it to everybody. It's probably the easiest.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't think I have anything else
City
to
Clerk.
report.
City Clerk.
City Clerk?
Oh, sorry. Well, you're not on camera. You're hiding way back there. But go ahead. Sorry.
Okay, thank you so much, Council President Wood. My report is this, that we have our absentee ballots at this point is almost the normal turnout for the August partisan primary. So that's pretty exciting, actually. We've been very busy. We're anticipating a lower turnout at the polls still. I'm hoping that's the case because I want everybody to be as safe as possible, though we will have all safety measures in place, and that is at the community center for everyone this time. And I also wanted to announce that Deputy Clerk Aline Hauser has completed her UW Green Bay training toward her certification as a Wisconsin certified municipal clerk. That is a wonderful achievement, and she is an amazing asset to this community, and we should all be very, very proud of her. Next year, she's going to attend what's called a completion year, so she'll learn things that aren't really encompassed in her job title, but are things that happen peripheral to her job that she should be more aware of. So I'm looking forward to that for her too. So kudos to Aline. That's all.
Yeah, pass on our congratulations to her. John, when is the deadline to request an absentee ballot, and then when is the deadline to return it?
I'm sorry, the deadline to request an absentee ballot is, it's the Thursday prior to the election, whatever date that is, and I apologize, I don't have that off the top of my head.
It's August 4th, I think.
I believe it's the 4th or 5th, something like that. Yes, thank you, Alder Groupie. And then I'm sorry, I didn't catch the second half of your question.
When do they have to return the ballot?
Oh, ballots have to be at the polling place by 8 o'clock on election day. But the post office has urged voters to mail their ballots back the Wednesday before the election to make sure that we get it. And I'm agreeing with that. We ran into those issues in April where people waited till the last minute, and please don't do that. Please get it done. And many people, I'm thinking, are getting that message because of the numbers of requests that we've had already, and there's still 3 weeks before the election. So
and they're going to be at
August 11th. Sorry, I just want to clarify the date of, it's August 11th. I misspoke earlier, and I want to make sure there's no confusion on that.
The election date is August 11th, but the last time a ballot can be mailed is I believe the Thursday before. So that would be, I believe, the 8th or something. I'm not sure. I'm sorry, I didn't know you were going to ask me, so I don't have that date in my mind right now.
It's the 6th, August 6th.
The 6th.
Yeah.
But anyway, get your darn request in. That's what I'm trying to say.
Now that I'm confused, so that's good. Not really. Did I hear you say this morning, John, at the staff meeting that there is going to be a Dropbox installed?
Yes, I'm very excited about that because the Dropbox is being paid for with WEC Cares grant money. It's a sub-grant of the CARES Act. And one of the items that they would cover for COVID-19 processes was a Dropbox specifically for ballots. And so we've got this really nice looking Dropbox that's going to be drive up outside of City Hall, clearly marked for ballots and larger sized so that, even though the payment Dropbox did accommodate ballots, people were really not confident that it would. This box will give you every confidence that it will. And it's very secure with double locks. And we will be checking it, several times a day, especially in November. So that's a really exciting thing. And our Public Works Department are the ones who are installing this. It's going to be fantastic. And then when election time is over, they're going to be removing it and storing it until the next election. So we will have it going forward every election from now on.
All right, great. All right, then I believe that is all the reports. Is there a motion? We don't have any appointments. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll move adjourn.
Second.
Sorry, who was the motion?
I move, Jennifer.
Thank you.
And yeah, take your pick. I think everybody. All
Brian, I have a
in favor-
question after the meeting.
For me?
Now for Brian.
Oh, Brian, okay. All right, all in favor of adjournment, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, bam, we're adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
You all.
See ya.
I don't know
Everyone.
each other, but still, yeah.